The night had no moon, only a thick ceiling of clouds pressing down on the mountains like a lid on a coffin. Wind slid through the rocks with a low whistle, carrying the smell of fuel, gust, and distant fire. Ethan Cole moved through it without sound, his boots finding stone as if the ground itself guided him. He wore no insignia, no flag, nothing that could tie him to a country or a cause. In this world, he was not a soldier. He was a solution. 5 years earlier, the world had been told he was dead. A failed extraction, a burning convoy, grainy satellite images, and a closed casket. His mother had cried over a folded flag. His name had been engraved into a wall of heroes. That version of Ethan Cole had ended. What remained was something colder, sharper, and far more dangerous. The CIA called it Shadow Protocol, though even that name existed only in whispers. It was not a unit you joined. It was a place you were buried into. Agents selected for it were erased, stripped of history, family, and future. They became assets that could be used where law, diplomacy, and morality collapsed. Ethan had not volunteered. He had simply been too good at surviving. He lay prone on a ridge overlooking the compound, watching patterns repeat. Guards walked in loops, lights swept in predictable arcs, cameras blinked at fixed intervals. Human systems were always flawed. That was what made them easy to break. He checked the timer on his wrist and inhaled once, deep and steady. Then he moved. The first guard never saw him. A hand over the mouth, a twist, a controlled drop to the ground. The body was hidden behind a generator before the echo of the fall could exist. Ethan flowed forward, every movement practiced to the point of instinct. Violence was not emotional for him. It was mechanical, like solving a problem with only one correct answer. Inside the compound, the air was warmer, humming with electricity and quiet urgency. He slipped through corridors painted in dull industrial colors, his reflection briefly flashing in glass panels. A man in his mid-30s stared back at him, eyes hollow but focused, a thin scar cutting through one eyebrow. He barely recognized himself anymore. The objective was simple on paper. Khalid Al-Rashid, former intelligence collaborator turned rogue power broker, had acquired a biochemical weapon known as Nyx. It was small, stable, and devastating. Release it in an enclosed urban environment, and tens of thousands would be dead before anyone understood what was happening. Official intervention was impossible. If the CIA moved openly, treaties would shatter and wars would ignite. So they sent a ghost. Ethan accessed the main server room and connected a drive, his fingers moving quickly as data poured in. Blueprints, shipment logs, financial transfers. Then he saw files that made his breath slow. Names, familiar ones. Operatives listed not as agents but as liabilities. Missions designed to fail. Deaths approved in advance. Shadow Protocol was not a safeguard. It was a disposal system. The realization settled heavily in his chest, but there was no time to sit with it. The lights flickered. An alarm screamed to life, sharp and sudden. Someone had known he was coming. Gunfire erupted in the corridor. Ethan rolled behind a steel pillar as rounds tore into the wall, sparks flying. He returned fire in short, controlled bursts, dropping 2 men before they could adjust. More footsteps thundered closer. He moved, fast and precise. Clearing rooms, climbing stairwells, his world narrowing to angles and timing. He reached the lower level where Nyx was stored, a sterile chamber bathed in pale blue light. The weapon sat inside a reinforced glass cylinder, beautiful in a terrifying way. That was when he heard slow clapping behind him. She stood near the entrance, calm, composed, her hair pulled back the way it always was during briefings. Sarah Mitchell, his handler, the woman who had looked him in the eye 5 years ago and told him extraction was impossible, that he needed to hold position. The woman who signed his death. "You're right on time," she said. Ethan didn't lower his weapon. "You set me up." She smiled slightly, not denying it. "You were always meant to end here." She spoke about balance, about control, about how Shadow Protocol existed to shape outcomes before chaos could spread. Nyx was leverage, she said, a silent threat that would keep nations obedient. Ethan listened, but something inside him had already hardened. He thought of his father, broken by wars, justified with clean words. He thought of the wall with his name carved into it. Sarah offered him a place beside her, a life in the shadows, with power beyond governments. For a moment, the idea hovered in the air. Then Ethan fired, not at her, but at the control console. Glass shattered. Alarms multiplied. The chamber began to lock down. Sarah screamed, rage finally breaking through her calm. Ethan grabbed the containment unit and triggered the self-destruct sequence. The countdown began, red numbers bleeding across the walls. He ran. The compound became a maze of fire and collapsing concrete. Smoke burned his lungs as he fought his way out, taken around to the shoulder. Pain flaring white-hot before discipline forced it down. He emerged into the night just as the ground shook beneath him. The explosion rolled across the mountains, swallowing the compound in flame and debris. Ethan didn't look back. He ran until the sounds of destruction faded into wind. Somewhere above, a drone circled, its quiet hum searching extraction, the CiA's final attempt to reclaim what they had lost. He stepped off the path and vanished into the rocks. Weeks later, the world moved on. News cycles shifted. Al-Rashid was reported dead in an unexplained blast. No mention of Nyx, no mention of Shadow Protocol. Files were deleted. Programs were renamed. Sarah Mitchell was promoted. In a crowded city far from deserts and secrets, a man with a different name walked through a morning market, blending into noise and color. He bought coffee, watched people laugh, listened to life continue. The CIA believed Ethan Cole was either dead or irrelevant. They were wrong, because some weapons do not explode, some survive, and some remember.